I bought the ticket for the Bernina Express on an impulse, one that held more resignation than excitement. I sat at the station in Tirano, squinting in the Italian sun, feeling the weight of the last few months, the emptiness after a loss, and the burnout from work pressing me down onto the weathered bench. Around me, a joyful crowd of tourists bustled, the clatter of suitcases mingling with a multilingual chatter. For them, this gleaming, red train was an adventure, a point on a travel map. For me, it was meant to be just an escape. A few hours in motion, intended to drown out my thoughts. While waiting for departure, I idly flipped through a brochure lying next to me. My eyes fell on black and white photographs and dates, 1908 to 1910. It was then, in an era of grand dreams and even greater efforts, that visionaries and engineers decided to challenge the Alps. They wanted to connect the north with the south, the German-speaking Engadin with the Italian Valtellina, not just for trade, but to open up this raw beauty to the world. I thought of those men in their stiff collars, poring over blueprints by the light of kerosene lamps. They had a goal that seemed impossible: to build a railway line at an altitude of over 2,200 meters, without using a cogwheel system, in harmony with nature. What a contrast to my own aimless drifting. When the train finally set off with almost silent grace, I felt nothing. It glided through the streets of Tirano like a guest who wishes not to disturb anyone. I looked through the enormous panoramic window, but I mostly saw my own reflection, the tired face of a 30-year-old who had lost his map somewhere along the way. The first time I lifted my head with genuine interest was when we reached Brusio. I had read about this viaduct in guidebooks, but no photograph could capture the feeling of being inside it. The train, instead of fighting the mountain, began to dance with it. It curved in a perfect, stone spiral, rising above its own tail. For a fraction of a second, looking down, I saw the tracks I had been on just a minute before. It was illogical, beautiful, and in some strange way, calming. It was as if those long-gone engineers were whispering across a century, when the path is too steep, don't fight. Find another way, even if it leads you in a circle. Something stirred in me for the first time in a long while. This structure wasn't an act of domination, but of humility and genius. Then came Lake Poschiavo. Its surface was so smooth and emerald that it looked like a polished stone set in a ring of mountains. The train slid along the shore, and I, instead of retreating into my thoughts, began to absorb the view. I watched the sun lay itself upon the water, how the architecture of the houses in the passing villages changed, the Italian lightness giving way to a sterner, Swiss solidity. My internal radio, previously tuned to static and noise, slowly began to find a clear frequency. I could hear the quiet clatter of the wheels and the distant bells of cows, not the internal monologue filled with blame. The higher we climbed, the simpler the world outside the window became. The vineyards disappeared, then the deciduous forests, and finally, even the mighty larches. What remained was rock, sparse vegetation, and a sky that grew a deeper shade of navy with every passing moment. I recalled a fragment from the brochure. The Bernina line was the first in the Alps designed to operate year-round. I imagined the train, that same red serpent, clearing its path through meters of snowdrifts to deliver mail and maintain a connection to the world for the inhabitants of these isolated valleys. It was a lifeline, not just a tourist attraction. At the Alp Grum stop, at an altitude of 2,091 meters, the train paused for a moment. I stepped out onto the platform and was struck by a chill and a silence so profound it was almost physical. Below my feet, the valley I had just left snaked away, green and distant like a memory. And before me, almost within reach, lay the Palu Glacier. Its blue crevasses looked like wrinkles on an ancient face. I felt unimaginably small. Not in a crushing way, but in a revitalizing one. My problems, which in Tirano had seemed as large as mountains, here, in the face of real mountains, shrank to the size of pebbles. The culmination occurred at the Bernina Pass. As the train rolled into Ospizio Bernina station, the world outside the window lost its color. There was only the white of Lago Bianco, a milky lake filled with glacial water, and the gray of the surrounding bare peaks. This was an absolute silence, one that rang in the ears. It was here, at an altitude of 2,253 meters, on the roof of this extraordinary railway, that I understood why I had come. Not to escape, but to find perspective. To stand in a place where you can only see what is fundamental: ice, rock, and time measured in millennia. I looked at the gigantic tongue of the Moritz glacier and thought of its slow, inexorable movement. Like that glacier, life also flows, sculpting the landscape of the soul, even when we feel like we are standing still. It was then I understood why UNESCO had inscribed this line on its World Heritage list. Not just for the viaducts or tunnels, but for the idea itself. For the fact that man had managed to create something so complex without destroying, but rather enhancing, the beauty of the surroundings. The descent to St. Moritz was a completely different experience. I felt calm, serene. As the train entered the Engadin Valley and the forests reappeared outside the windows, this time slender Swiss pines, I looked at them with a sense of tenderness. I was grateful for their presence. The train passed the Morteratsch station, from where a path leading to the glacier's tongue was visible. Signs with dates showed how much it had retreated over the last 100 years. I felt a pang of sadness. This journey was also a testament to the fragility of this majesty. When I stepped off onto the platform in St. Moritz, I was enveloped by a world of luxury, elegance, and whispers of great fortunes. I thought about how the city owed its modern existence to that red thread of a railway, which had brought the first winter tourists here over a century ago, transforming a quiet alpine village into the world capital of winter sports. I no longer felt a dissonance. I wasn't an intruder. I walked along the lake, its turquoise water shimmering in the afternoon sun, the silence of the pass still ringing in my ears. The red train hadn't just taken me from point A to point B. It had carried me through the mountains, but also through a history of human determination and through myself. I hadn't escaped my problems, but I had seen them from the very top, from the perspective of a glacier. And from up there, everything looks different. It is smaller, simpler, and somehow easier to bear. I knew then that it wasn't about finding a new map, but about learning to navigate without one, trusting that sometimes, the right path is the one that leads you in a circle.